Imagine waking up not to an alarm, but to the cold bite of a cave floor. No phone, no fridge, no neighbors. No, just darkness and the smell of old ash. This was reality for every man and woman who lived during the Paleolithic era. But here's what most people get wrong. Their lives weren't simple. They were savage, strategic, and deeply divided by role. Men and women didn't compete with each other. They couldn't afford to. Instead, they evolved two different toolkits, one for each half of the survival equation. Let's start with the man's world, because it's the one Hollywood loves to fake. A Paleolithic man woke up before first light, not because he was ambitious, but because the hunt demanded it. His body was lean, scarred, and wired for explosive action. He checked his spear first, stone tip still sharp, haft still tight. One loose knot meant death. Then he looked at the fire. If the women had let it die overnight, his morning would begin with rage and frozen fingers. But usually, the fire still breathed. The women had done their job. Men left the cave in silence. Talking scared the game. They moved as a pack, 4 to 7 hunters, sometimes more. Each man knew his position without being told. Flanker, driver, killer, wounded animal finisher. They had practiced these roles since childhood, not in games, in real chases. The target might be a wounded bison, a lost deer, or if they were desperate, a sleeping cave bear. Men didn't hunt for glory. They hunted because protein meant brains. Brains meant survival. Successful hunt ended with blood on every hand. They butchered where the animal fell. The men carried the heaviest quarters back to camp, sometimes 10 miles on raw feet. Failure meant returning empty-handed. No sympathy, no comfort. Just the cold stare of hungry children. But here's the secret they don't teach in schools. Most hunts failed. For every mammoth they brought down, there were 20 days of tracking nothing but wind. So what did a Paleolithic man do on those empty days? He made tools. Knapping flint wasn't a hobby. It was a masculine art form passed from father to son. A good hand axe took 20 minutes. Perfect one took 2 hours and bleeding fingertips. Men also repaired shelters, scouted new hunting grounds, and fought off predators that crept too close. And yes, they fought other men. Territorial violence was real, brutal, and often fatal. A male skull from 10,000 years ago shows blunt force trauma that would kill a modern man instantly, but he survived because his band carried him. Because men protected men. Now let's walk to the other side of the cave, the woman's world. Forget everything you've seen in cartoons. The Paleolithic woman was not weak, but she was not passive. Her hands were calloused, her shoulders were strong, her eyes missed nothing. She woke before the men because someone had to keep the fire alive. While the hunters slept, she fed the embers dry grass and bone chips, breathing life into the coals. Fire was her first child. If it died, her family died. Once the fire was steady, she organized the other women and older children. Their mission? Gather everything the hunters couldn't chase. She carried a digging stick, sharpened by her own hands, and a woven bag slung across her chest. Within an hour, she had left the cave and entered the green world. She knew exactly which roots were sweet and which would swell her throat shut. No, she knew which berries ripened first on the south-facing slope. She knew where the wild onions grew and where the deadly nightshade hid. A modern botanist would need a textbook. She needed only her nose and memory. While she dug for tubers, her ears tracked the birds. Sudden silence meant a predator. She didn't scream, she froze.
Ah!
Then she signaled the other women with a single hand gesture. If it was a leopard, they climbed. It was a man from another band, they ran. Gathering wasn't peaceful. It was silent warfare against starvation and violence. But here's what most people never realize. Women provided the majority of daily calories. The men's meat was feast or famine. The women's plants were steady, reliable, life-saving. On days when the hunters came home with nothing, the children still ate because the women had found nuts and eggs and honey. A Paleolithic woman also carried her infants for years. No strollers, no babysitters, just her hip and a sling made from deer hide. She worked while nursing, she gathered while a baby pulled her hair, and when the child cried at night, she was the one who woke, again and again, with no coffee to save her. But she was not alone. Older women, grandmothers, were the secret weapon of human survival. A postmenopausal woman could gather twice as fast as a young mother. She knew every edible mushroom within 20 miles. She had outlived 2 husbands and buried 3 children. Her memory was the band's first library. And men listened to her because ignoring a grandmother got people killed. At dusk, the men and women came back together around the fire. This was not romantic. It was strategic. The men dropped their meat, while the women dropped their roots. Everyone calculated, do we eat tonight or save for tomorrow? Then came the unspoken trade. Women took the animal hides and began scraping flesh from the inside. Men took the digging sticks and resharpened the tips for the next day. Neither could survive without the other. That's the truth they erase in modern debates. A single man in the Paleolithic died within months. No fire, no mended clothes, no one to watch his back. Single woman died faster. No meat, no protection. No one to break open the hardest nuts. But together, man and woman, hunter and gatherer, they conquered every climate on Earth. Children watched all of this. Every day, every action was a lesson. Boys followed the men by age 7, learning to nap flint and stalk antelope. Girls followed the women by age 5, learning which leaves stopped bleeding and which snakes meant run. By 12, a Paleolithic teenager was a fully functioning adult, not by law, by necessity. There was no adolescence, no gap year, no figuring yourself out. You were useful or you were dead, and everyone chose useful. The elderly who could no longer hunt or gather, they weren't abandoned, became storytellers, tool sharpeners, and fire watchers. They earned their place until their last breath. This was the Paleolithic contract. You work for the band, and the band works for you. Men and women didn't fight for power because power was imaginary. Food was real. Fire was real. Children were real. So when you imagine a caveman, don't picture a brute. Picture a partner. Picture a survivor. Picture your own blood. Because every man alive today carries the spear, arm of his ancestor, and every woman carries the digging stick of hers. Together, they built you. At dusk, the men and women came back together around the fire, not for romance, but for survival. The men dropped their meat, the women dropped their roots. Everyone calculated the same equation. Do we eat everything tonight, or do we save something for tomorrow's hunger? This nightly negotiation was the first economy. No coins, just trust and shared memory. Women took the animal hides and began scraping flesh from the inside, because rotten leather meant frozen feet. Men took the digging sticks and resharpened the tips, because a dull stick meant empty bags tomorrow. Neither gender could survive without the other. That's not opinion. That's bone-deep biology. A single man in the Paleolithic died within months. No fire, no mended clothes, no one to watch his back at night. Single woman died faster. No heavy meat, no protection from rival bands, no one to break the hardest nuts. But together, man and woman, hunter and gatherer, spear and digging stick, they conquered every climate on Earth. Children watched all of this, every single day. Every action was a living textbook. Boys followed the men by age 7, learning to nap flint, stalk antelope, and bleed quietly from a wound. Girls followed the women by age 5, learning which leaves stopped bleeding and which snakes meant instant death. By 12 years old, a Paleolithic teenager was a fully functioning adult, not by law, by raw necessity. There was no adolescence, no gap year, no finding yourself. You were useful or you were dead. And yet the elderly who could no longer hunt or gather, they were not thrown away. They became storytellers, tool sharpeners, fire watchers, and the living memory of every drought and flood. This was the Paleolithic contract. You work for the band, and the band fights for you until your last breath. Men and women didn't fight for power because power was imaginary. Food was real, fire was real, children were real. So when you imagine a caveman, don't picture a brute with a club. Picture a partner. Picture a survivor. Picture your own blood, because every man alive today carries the spear arm of his ancestor, and every woman carries the digging stick of hers. Together, they built you.